Hello again and welcome back to our course on Excel 2013. In the last two sections we've been looking at entering data and particularly at different formats of data. I'd like to begin this third section on entering and editing data by looking at some of the other formats, and then we're going to look at editing and finally deleting data. So let's begin by looking at some of the other numeric data formats. If I put, for instance, the number 0.5 into cell B11, tick, I've still got cell B11 selected. Now let me bring up the Format Cells dialog. And when I type in a number like that, what generally happens is that Excel 2013 assigns a format of general. And you see the little note there, general format cells have no specific number format. Now if I'd typed a $sign in beforehand, it would have assumed one of the finance related formats, probably currency, but that would depend on a couple of other things as well. But generally speaking, when you're typing in, it's quite common for the format that's assigned to be general. If I clicked on number, then one of the things that happens is if I assign number format, it says how many decimal places would you like, and by default there will be 2. Note that this isn't in number format yet, it still thinks it's general. Until I click on OK on this dialog, it will still think it's general format. But if I wanted to make it into a number and I wanted it to have 2 decimal places, I have 2 here. Let's go for 3 decimal places. I can also say whether I want 1000 separator or not. Now whichever format you are assigning to the contents of one or more cells, there will almost always be a set of other things that you can choose from, and it will normally also show you the different ways that that number could appear. So for example, here it says for negative numbers you can have a minus sign, you can have the number in red, you can have the number in braces, brackets, which is really an accounting standard to show negative numbers in brackets, or you can have red in brackets. So you can choose which format you'd like for negative numbers. So that's the option here with a straightforward number. If I click on OK, I have got a 3 decimal place regular number. So let's now try some of the other available number formats. We've already seen currency. Note with currency you can also specify the number of decimal places. I'm going to change it back to 2. And you can also specify the currency symbol. It defaults to the US dollar here as I have the US locale set, but you have virtually every available currency in the world is available for you there. Obviously if you're working in any locale, you may be dealing with currency in a different locale, so you need to be able to access other options. Accounting format is actually very similar to currency. A couple of differences. One of them, it deals with negative numbers in the standard accounting way, but secondly the currency symbol appears on the left of the cell. So if I turn 0.5 into accounting format, it would look like this, with a dollar at the left hand edge of the cell that the amount of money is in. Now of course when I entered this number I didn't actually say to Excel this is an amount of money. I've told it that subsequently, so I could tell Excel that it's a percentage. Click on OK, and of course it's 50.00%. Here's another one. What about putting it as a fraction? It's a half. And another one. What about putting it in scientific notation? That's 5 times 10 to the minus 1. So let's now look at these last 2 codes here. We have custom and special. Custom we saw before, and with custom you can create a sort of pattern, and you can require that data entered into one or more cells follows that pattern. Now using the custom format is beyond the scope of this course. We did see an example earlier on where it had interpreted what was intended to be a date as a custom format. But if I look next at special, Special is really, if you like, a special case of custom, in that depending on your locale, certain formats are provided for you. Now, if your locale is United States, then you can choose one of these special formats: zip code, the zip code +4, the longer one, the phone number, or social security number. If, for example, you chose social security number and applied that format to one or more cells, then data entered into that cell or those cells would have to be a valid social security number. A similar thing applies for phone numbers and zip codes. Now, you can create your own formats in custom, or you can use the standard local ones in special. If my locale was not English United States, let's take another example. Let's try French France. Then I have a number of other formats, many of these related to telephone numbers but also postal codes as well, that a user with a locale of French France could use for one or more cells on a worksheet. Let's look at the time format. I've got a cell selected there, B11, format cells. Now I've got that set with a time format of, you see the example there, 13:30:55. So it's 24-hour clock. It doesn't have AMs and PMs, it has 24-hour clock. Let me now type in that cell 2 space PM. What do you think will happen? Click on tick, and it's 1400. So I've already told the cell that it's a time field and it's 24-hour clock, and provided I type something in there that is a valid time, and as far as Excel is concerned 2 PM is a valid time, then it will display that time in the format I have specified for that cell. If I then go back into format again, format cells, and supposing I now changed to the AM PM format, clicked on OK, then it would show that time in the AM PM format. Now finally, in terms of these formats, let's look at the text format, which we've used already, but this particular cell C7 has a long line of text in it. We know that if there's too much text to fit in the space available, then with the settings we currently have, the text appears in front of various other cells. If I go into format cells, the type again is defaulted to general. If I set it to text, an important note there, text format cells are treated as text even when a number is in the cell. The cell is displayed exactly as entered. So for instance, in the next cell, if I actually typed 3.47, tick that, let's check the format. Again, it's defaulted to a general format. If I make that text, note it's now left aligned in the cell. Whatever I do, other than changing the format of course, that is treated as text. It's not treated as a number. Excel won't change the number of decimal places. I'll put a scientific notation in or anything like that. It's text. Exactly what you type is exactly what you'll see, and that's a very important distinction, because sometimes you will want to put just a number in a text field, and what you don't want is for something to change that number when you don't want it to be changed. So the important thing about text is you type text and that's it. What you type is what you see. The next thing I'd like to look at is editing data. And editing data is actually very straightforward, although there are 2 or 3 ways of going about it. Now let's look at these 2 fields we've got here. We've got a field with some text in it, and in fact we've got 2 fields with text in it, but the second one appears to be a number, although we know that it is actually text. If you click, say, in C7 here, where we've got the long piece of text, there are really 3 ways of going about editing it. One way of going about it is to just edit it within the cell. Now if you just wanted, say, to change the word good, it's actually quite tricky here, because the word good is in front of a different cell. It's in front of the cell E7, and you couldn't actually edit it there because you'd actually be typing in E7. So what you can do as an alternative, and something you may prefer to do anyway, instead of trying to type and edit within a cell, is to use the formula bar. So if I wanted to change good men to great men, having selected C7, I can click in the formula bar to the right of the word good, then use the backspace key to delete 3 characters, and then type the new word. Now note that as I'm editing, what I'm doing is being reflected down here in the cell, and when I've finished I can either tick to complete the change, or if I'm partway through I can press the cancel button to cancel the change. Don't forget there's always the undo option as well, so let me just undo that change. Now there are a couple of ways of doing this that you may prefer. Let's suppose that you wanted to make that same change that I just made, but using the cell. As I said, that's a little bit tricky, but if you double click on C7, you get a cursor appearing. You can now use the cursor keys to go out to the right, even though you're in front of some of those other cells like D7 and E7. You can literally delete the 3 letters at the end of good, and you can type. Note the cursor is still in effectively C7, even though the contents of C7 spill over in front of other cells. So again, I could tick and then undo if necessary if I didn't want that change. If I cross at this stage, then it just cancels the work that I've done. Now if you're using a touch device and you want to edit the contents of a cell, you just need to double tap on the cell, and the cursor, as you see there, appears in the cell, and you can move it around. You can use the delete key, type, etc. Now you'll be getting quite a bit more practice later in the course on editing, but there's one other thing I need to show you now, and that is how to delete and clear contents of cells and parts of cells. Let's just take, for example, cell A4 in this spreadsheet. This A4 contains a date that we entered earlier on. Note that the whole cell is selected. I can see the outline of the cell, and you can't see the cursor within the text anywhere, either there or in the formula bar. When a whole cell is selected, if you press the del or delete key, the whole contents are deleted. If on the other hand, let's take cab fare to Grand Hotel, select that, but this time let's double click it as though we were going to edit within the text. Note the cursor now is partway through the word grand in the cell. Similarly, I could click in the formula bar and do it there. If I press the delete key now, I only delete a single character. If I press the backspace key, I delete the character to the left of the cursor, so the backspace key in this case will delete the R. If I press the delete key or del key, I'll delete the character to the right of the cursor, which in this case will be the N. So that's how to delete a single character, and that's how to clear the whole contents of a cell. So now I'm going to give you one of these to try for yourself. If you go into Backstage View and then open, you should find on recent workbooks the example 01, which will be in the folder of the examples that you downloaded with the course. If you can't see that, if you've perhaps been doing other things, it's not on your recent workbooks, then just go into computer and browse in the usual way. But one way or another, open example 01. And that particular example is a fairly straightforward spreadsheet with opening and closing times of a particular facility. Now, the opening times on Mondays are 8 AM to 5 PM, Tuesdays 8 AM to 5 PM. What we're going to do is we're going to change these times, and we're going to show the times on the 24-hour clock. So that should say 0800, that should say 1700, and so on. Also, I want you to change Saturday to be 7 PM instead of 8 PM. And then if you'd like a real challenge, change the opening hours 2012 to say opening hours 2013. Now you may well think that changing opening hours 2012 to opening hours 2013 is pretty straightforward, But it's a little bit different because what we've got here are what are called merged cells, and that's something we're going to look at later on. But I'll just give you a little clue there. If you click in A1, you will see in the formula bar what you need to change. So I'll leave you to do that for yourself. Look at example 02 when you finish to make sure you agree with what's there, and I'll see you in the next section.